there is no spite. What it is sadness. Sadness from both of them that a 13-year marriage has broken down. There are messages from Rosa that Miss Shea didn't read. I'm coming today. I just have to do a couple of things first. I want to see you also. I will lay next to you and hold you. I will wake you. I want to. That wasn't read to you. It wasn't read to you to mislead you. Read all of the messages. I'm not going to sit here and read all 83 pages to you. Read them all. It will give you a true flavor. Also within those messages, you will not see any suggestion of planned homicidal violence. There are no threats in there. It's just sadness and love. The damage has been done both ways. They're both sad. Messages aren't all of the communication that Tim and Rosa had during this time period. The state, with Investigator Little, spent time going through call detail records. The call detail records show that there were phone calls between Tim and Rosa during this time period too. And Investigator Little said during his pattern of life analysis that Ms. Kramer's device spent a significant amount of her time at the marital residence up until a week before this happened. So not the 2-3 weeks that her family members had testified about. She was there spending most of her time there trying to work out what was broken up until the last week. So look at those call detail records. See the phone calls between them. We don't know what was talked about during that time, but when you look at all the messages, you look at the phone calls, you can safely assume that it was two people trying to work out their issues. The email. You have to read the email with the text messages, consider the phone calls, but what's important about the emails and the messages is that this is not the lure and ambush case that Ms. Shea suggests it is. Mr. Kramer, in his last few emails, announces that he's home. Rosa receives those messages. She knows he's there. He's announcing he's there. There's no evidence that Mr. Kramer pulled his vehicle in the back of the home and hid it there, laying in wait for his wife to get home. Why would he do that and then announce that he's home? It doesn't make any sense. You have to look at all of this evidence critically, and you have to look at all of it together. Don't just isolate little text messages. Don't just isolate a single email. Look at it all together, and you get a complete picture. And it's not a picture of premeditated murder. It's not a picture of second-degree murder. It's not a picture of murder at all. And this isn't unusual for her to be going over to the house. During this time period, she had been going back and forth. So there's nothing different about that day that she's suddenly luring her there. He'd been trying to get her there, and she had been going there. They had been working things out. She even stayed there for the majority of 3 days, spending an overnight there. Little's presentation confirmed that. A couple of other things to clear up from Ms. Shea's argument. She showed you photograph E36, which showed the white dresser and the brown dresser. And the state seemed to suggest that these two dressers were miles apart. That's how they want to make it seem, but they're right next to each other. The gun is on the brown dresser. They're not on opposite sides of the room. It's a very small room. So when Ms. Kramer slams her hand down on the dresser, the gun's right there. The two dressers are side by side. Just because she slams her hand down on the white dresser doesn't change the fact that the gun is right in between them. Ms. Shea spoke a lot about the scratch marks and how those don't justify self-defense. That is not what Mr. Kramer's testimony was. He didn't say that he defended himself from his wife because of some scratch marks. He said that he defended himself against his wife, who had been kicking him in his knees, hitting him in the back, threatened to kill him. That's why he defended himself. There's a gun in the room, the small room in between them. That's why he defended himself. He believed he was going to die. Rosa told him, "I'm going to kill you." She's seen the gun in between them that she knows how to use, and she can pick up, shoot him, and kill him. What is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to try to get out of the room? There's no duty to retreat when you're in a place where you have the right to be. And if he tries to get out of the room, what is she going to do? Grab the gun and shoot him in the back? The two of them, one of them wasn't going to leave that room. That's what Tim thought that night. There's a gun right in between them. So he didn't defend himself over some scratches. He defended himself after he was beaten by his wife, which had happened before. He was afraid of her based on what had happened before, and that's something you can consider. That's in the jury instruction. Ms. Shea spent some time talking about how Mr. Kramer testified that he didn't know he had shot his wife. That was not the evidence. What Mr. Kramer said was he didn't remember exactly where she was when he fired the shots. Of course he knew he shot her. He told you after he shot her, he was stunned. He was shocked. He was devastated. He knew he shot her. What the testimony from Tim was as he staggered to grab the gun from a stooped position and fired the shots, he didn't know exactly where she was. He didn't know where Cody was. This is a traumatic situation, one that not many people ever find themselves in, but when you do find yourself in a situation like that, not everyone reacts the same. You're also not looking at the clock, trying to figure out, well, what time did I shoot her? What time did I move the car? What time did I call my sister? Tim doesn't know what happened afterwards. He told you he was a zombie. Why was he a zombie? Because he was devastated that he shot and killed the love of his life. Not something he wanted to do, something he had to do. Forgive him for not remembering the exact time that he did things. Forgive him for not knowing exactly where he was when he quickly pulled the trigger to defend himself. Ms. Shea spoke a little bit about the feelings of being trapped. Yes, they were both trapped in that room because Rosa closed the door. There was nowhere for them to go. But that's not really the central issue. The central issue is the gun in between them. Okay? There's no way to get out. If he tries to get out, she can grab the gun and shoot him. Ms. Shea spent some time talking a little bit about the stippling. The ME testified that the stippling behind the ear, it was more spread out, so that is more indicative of being on the greater range than the lesser range, right? She said 2 to 3 inches to 3 feet. When stippling is more spread out, it's further away. The ME also testified that all of the other gunshots had no stippling, but that doesn't mean that those weren't at close range as well, because we know there's an intermediate object, Cody, unfortunately. But what does that really do for us? We heard Cody, the vet said Cody's about knee height, and we saw photographs from inside of the bedroom where the casings were. One of the casings is underneath the dresser. When you fire a gun, the casings usually go to the right, okay, and up. If Cody is getting shot, he's low to the ground, casings are low to the ground. That tells you that whoever's firing the gun is low to the ground as well, which is consistent with what Tim testified to about grabbing the gun from the dresser as he's hunched over and just firing quickly. So that's consistent with what Mr. Kramer testified to. The disturbed earth that Deputy Glass testified about, that doesn't prove anything. Deputy Glass can't say when that earth was disturbed. He's not an agriculturalist or anything like that. Yes, the gate was opened. He has no idea when the gate was opened. There's nothing to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the vehicle was pulled behind the home before Ms. Kramer got back versus after this terrible incident took place. Absolutely no evidence of hiding and waiting. One more thing about Cody. Ms. Shea presented you with a couple of text messages about Cody between Rosa and Tim. The first is both of them being angry that the dog had pooped on the floor. I think anyone would be upset about their dog pooping on the floor. But then the next message, Ms. Shea tries to twist it. There's more than one way to look at the message about giving Cody up. At this point in the messages, and read them for the context, Tim believes that he's going to be homeless. So is it that he doesn't care about Cody, that he's going to give him up? Or is it that he actually does care and he doesn't want his dog to be homeless as well? You don't see Rosa then saying, hey, I'll take Cody. That's Tim's dog. He didn't mean to hurt his dog. The last thing I'll address with Ms. Shea's argument has to do with Tim's testimony. It seems as though she suggested that he was being evasive. You watched the testimony as well as everyone else, and he sat there and he answered each and every one of her questions. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. He was not evasive. He was upfront. He admitted when he lied. He admitted when he was wrong, but he was not evasive. So when you're considering his testimony, that's not something that should put a chink in his armor. So the text messages between Tim and Dolores. Those messages, again, you have to take in complete context. And I know we got to hear each and every one of them. they become bizarre. They really do, especially when Dolores starts questioning Tim about whether or not Rosa is actually dead. But what is interesting is clearly Tim is looking into stand your ground laws. He's looking into self-defense. He's wondering about what had just happened. If you had just premeditatedly murdered someone, why are you looking up the rules about self-defense? It's because something else happened. Tim, is not the smartest guy in the world. He has an 8th grade education. The jobs that he's worked throughout the years are simple jobs. I'm not saying anything negative about that, but you have to understand his mindset and his intelligence when he's trying to unpack what just happened. Those messages suggest that something other than premeditated murder happened, and Tim is trying to figure it out. A lot of what is in those messages does corroborate what he said. Yes, there are some lies. There are lies to the Milton Police Department when they arrive as well. But again, this is a traumatic thing that Tim just went through. And not everyone deals with it the same way. But his research suggests that he's trying to figure out what just happened and what is the law. And it's not premeditated murder that he's looking at. So what you have to do, and we're just going to walk through the state's evidence, is see, has the state proven the case beyond a reasonable doubt, and have they, with their evidence, disproved self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt? And with each witness, there are things that corroborate what Tim said. Some of the witnesses are nothing that the defense contested, because a lot of what happened in this case is black and white. What this case is really about, it's not about the 3 months of marital discord. It's about those 13 minutes in that house, which we have very little insight into what happened during that time, but that's what we have to analyze. Ms. Merkman was the first witness who testified for the state. And really what she said we don't disagree with. There were marital problems. Rosa went over to the house that day. One thing that she corroborated, and you have to look for corroboration of Mr. Kramer's testimony wherever you can look for it, is Ms. Merkman confirmed that her sister did martial arts. She confirmed that Rosa was having mental health issues and that she was on leave from work. Those are all things to consider, because what Rosa is going through and the things that are affecting her, Tim knows about that. Tim knows her mental state, so when she comes into the house that night, agitated, intoxicated, all of that is at play when you're judging whether or not he was reasonable in defending himself. Tim knew at the time she was mentally unstable, and that was confirmed by her sister. With both Ms. Merkman and Mr. Keelis, they both confirmed that Rosa liked to drink wine. There's nothing wrong with that. Her father doesn't remember Rosa drinking the night before or drinking the morning of, or using her medical marijuana products the night before or the morning of. No one knows. But what we do know is at the time that she died, she was under the influence of alcohol, 0.58, under the influence of Xanax. The medical examiner testified that it was at a level where people have found to be driving under the influence, as well as THC. all of those mixed together with someone who is going through a mental health crisis. That is what Tim was presented with when she walked in through the front door. All of those things going on, and all of those things you have to consider when you're deciding whether or not he was reasonable and justified in defending himself. Jonathan Glass, we already spoke about his testimony. Benjamin Gauntlet, he finds Tim's vehicle up in Milton. He said that Tim willingly spoke with them, albeit he lied, we know. That's all part of Tim just didn't know what to do. He hadn't had a chance to consult with a lawyer yet. He wanted to. But what Gauntlet testifies to is also about Dolores and about Dolores telling, you can hear on the body camera or on the in-car video that Dolores says that Tim is scared. Yes, he is scared. He just went through something very horrible and he doesn't know what's going to happen next. It's also important to note that Gauntlet confirmed that he has dealt with Dolores before, and he knows that Dolores has mental health issues, and unfortunately that was the only person that Tim had to turn to get advice from. Brian Shorett, he just went up to Milton. There's really nothing we dispute about what he says that doesn't help the state's case, doesn't help really anything. Lawrence Mesita, he took a number of photos. He didn't take photos of Tim's legs, just the upper body. And again, there was a lot of emphasis placed on the scratch marks. Don't get confused. The scratch marks on the chest, the possible scratch on the arm, that is not why this was self-defense. This was self-defense because there was a gun between two people, one of whom was intoxicated and struggling with mental health issues. The other thing about this is with a premeditated murder, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if this is premeditated murder that Tim lures Rosa to the home, and then after premeditatedly murdering her, he just leaves his bloody clothes on. He just keeps the gun. What sense does that make? If you're going to premeditatedly murder someone, you're going to get rid of evidence rather than keeping it. What that shows, and this is the evidence that Mesita collected, not the gun. We'll talk a little bit about that. He didn't search the Tahoe. He's not one of the many people who missed the gun. But it just doesn't make much sense that after premeditated murder, you don't try to get rid of evidence. We're reading all of these text messages. They weren't deleted. They were kept intact. All of the evidence was really kept intact. Tim mentioned that he did try to clean up a little bit, but there's only one small area of that house that was mopped up. It's clearly someone who did not expect what happened to be on the agenda for the morning. Zachary Gither found the car. There was some argument between Ms. Shea and Tim yesterday about whether the car was hidden or not. That's semantics. He moved the car. It was one of the many poor decisions he made after the fact when he was, in his words, zombied out, devastated by what had just happened. Again, if this is premeditated murder, you think you have a better plan of what you're going to do after the fact. Marissa Beetson, she's the one, you remember, took a lot of photographs inside of the home. And she testified that that bedroom is small. It might be hard to tell from the photographs, but it's a very small space. She found 4 casings. Look at the photographs of where the casings were found. Low, underneath the dresser, on the dog bed. What that indicates and what that is consistent with is with what Tim testified to, that he was low to the ground himself when he fired. 2 projectiles are recovered from the scene, and it's the state's contention that the position of those projectiles on the ground indicates that Tim was standing over Rosa at the time he fired shots at her. That doesn't make sense for a couple of reasons, but the number one reason that that doesn't make sense is because of where Cody was positioned, and that some of those projectiles went through Cody as well. So it's more consistent with what Tim described about how things happened than with what the state contends. The other thing about Ms. Beatson's testimony, and you have to look at it in connection with the medical examiner's testimony, just because a projectile is on the floor, that doesn't mean anything about the path that it took. Okay, when a projectile passes through objects, passes through bodies, the path of it changes. So just because that's where it lies, that doesn't tell you anything about where it was fired from. The vet, Dr. Lee, we already spoke about the dog's height. You have to think about looking at the scene and where is the blood, where is the dog positioned at the time. There's no blood up on the bed. There's a little bit of blood on the dog bed, but most of it is centered, on the floor. And that gives you just a tiny bit of insight into where everyone was positioned at the time that this happened. But also, Dr. Lee, in considering, the animal cruelty, she said that this was a good dog that was cared for with a healthy weight. It was a love dog. That was her contention based on how she encountered him and the way that Cody acted with her. Danielle Armstrong, we've already talked about her testimony with some of the other things, with the stippling and considering the range and the bullets changing trajectory, especially when they pass through a dog. And she confirmed, yes, that Rosa was intoxicated at the time that all of this happened. And that's all important for you to consider when you're considering if the state has disproved self-defense. She also testified about Rosa's size, 66 inches, which is 5'6". Tim testified that he's 5'5". It's in the jury instruction for self-defense that you can consider, the physical capabilities and the build of people. She weighed 192 pounds. Tim weighed 155 pounds at the time, so she outweighed him. You heard from Tim also about his physical limitations, about his issues with his knees, about his issues with his back. During the autopsy, Dr. Armstrong examined everything about Rosa and didn't find any physical limitations. Brittany Bishop, she testified about the search of the Kia. There's nothing there that helps the state's case of premeditated murder. There's nothing there that helps the state overcome self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt. Jennifer Hall. I'm only going to talk about this once, but it's important to consider that the people charged with investigating this case, a case which they knew was first-degree murder with a firearm, that when they search the suspect's vehicle, they don't find the gun. That's sloppy. It wasn't hidden away in the vehicle. It was just underneath the front seat. Jennifer Hall missed it, Investigator Timo missed it, Investigator Crawford missed it, and then with Investigator Crawford, who's charged with quarterbacking the entire case, she knows 2 projectiles are found at the scene. She knows 1 projectile is recovered from Rosa. Where's the 4th projectile? Did she bother to go back to look for it? No, she only went to that house once. And when she realized that one of the projectiles was missing, it didn't even cross her mind to go looking for it again. It's sloppy, and those are the people that are investigating this case. You don't get a complete picture of what happened in that bedroom because the investigators couldn't be bothered with going back to take another look. LaShawn Kelly, who you heard from just yesterday, he confirmed what we already knew, that Tim and Rosa had marital problems. He also gave you a little insight into Tim. He said Tim is a pretty flat person. Tim is Tim. There's no other way to really describe him. He's a good worker. He does his job. That's all that he offered. That doesn't, just because Tim told his manager a couple of months before this happened that there were marital problems, that's not evidence of premeditated murder. Mr. Kelly didn't say that he complained about his wife or expressed any hatred or ill will or spite, just simply that there were marital problems and that it upset him. Again, you have to look at all of it when you're considering what has to be in the mind for premeditated murder, what has to be in the mind for second-degree murder. That evidence is completely lacking from this case. Matthew Bevins extracted some phones. That doesn't get the state's case any closer. Brittany Crawford, we already spoke about her. She spent an hour and a half or so reading 143 pages of messages between Dolores and Tim. They chose not to read these messages. I again urge you, when you go back to deliberate, read all of these messages. Okay? It gives you a better insight into what was going on at the time. And when the state chooses to show you some things and not show you others, you have to look at all of it. Okay? There's a reason why they don't want you to see all of it.
Sustained.
Brianna Snowden, we agree. The gun that she found, that she analyzed, the gun that was plain as day under the driver's seat, is the gun that was used in this case, the gun that was in between Tim and Rosa during an argument. Jennifer Wilkerson, again, we don't disagree with what she testified to. It does, again, bring me back to, if this is premeditated murder, why does Tim keep on wearing the clothes that he committed premeditated murder in? It doesn't make sense. What makes more sense is that if something that he didn't plan for happened, the aftermath isn't going to make a whole lot of sense. The last witness you heard from for the state, John Little, it was a nice presentation. Again, the way that it was presented to you was calculated. When they're corroborating the locations, are they showing benign texts or are they taking texts out of context? Should I put a knife in her hand? And that's the one that they flash up on the screen. Again, look at all of the evidence, consider it all in context. So that's what the state presented. And the state's evidence again, does not show any premeditation, does not show any hatred, ill will, or spite. This is not first-degree murder. This is not second-degree murder. Tim testified. Tim didn't have to testify. He chose to testify to tell his story. And Tim's version of what happened presents a situation where Rosa came over to the house. She came over aggravated, upset. There was an argument in the living room. The argument carried over into the bedroom. Rosa got incensed because Tim wouldn't sell her the house. She got incensed because he wouldn't leave her even a dresser or a TV. Rosa attacked Tim. She kicked him in the knees. She hit him in the back. Tim somehow found it within himself to push her off of him, to stagger towards the gun, to grab it, and shoot himself in self-defense. She told him that she was going to kill him. He feared that that was true. He had nowhere to go, nowhere to run. If he tried to, he would have been shot in the back. Tim was defending himself. Tim didn't want to do what he did. He feels awful about it. But he was left with no choice. Tim is not guilty.